Hi. So in this video I'm going to talk to you about the Epic of Gilgamesh. So this poem is important partially because it's one of the oldest pieces of surviving literature in the world. This poem goes back to ancient Mesopotamia. So we're talking several thousand years before the birth of Jesus. The poem itself is a really interesting one because we can see, even from the sort of earliest phase of literature, a number of themes that are significant throughout the entire canon of world literature. So the Epic of Gilgamesh deals with what it means to be a good king. It deals with the hero's journey. It deals with overcoming obstacles or overcoming adversity. It deals with the value of friendship and the value of community. And so that's actually the thing that I'm really interested in about the Epic of Gilgamesh, is the role of community here. Because in a way it's a coming of age story. So the poem starts out with Gilgamesh as king of the city of Uruk, which is one of the major cities of the ancient Mesopotamian. And he's not a great king by almost anyone's standards. So the poem says, by the way, we have no idea who wrote this or if it was written by one person. Almost certainly it wasn't. So I'm just going to refer to the poet or the text itself rather than a particular author. But the poem says, "In the enclosure of Uruk he strode back and forth, lording it like a wild bull, his head thrust high. The onslaught of his weapons had no equal. His teammates stood forth by his game stick. He was harrying the young men of Uruk beyond reason. Gilgamesh would leave no son to his father. Day and night he would rampage fiercely. Gilgamesh," the text is lost here, "this was the shepherd of ramparted Uruk. This was the people's shepherd, bold, superb, accomplished, and mature. Gilgamesh would leave no girl to her mother, the warrior's daughter, the young man's spouse. Goddesses kept hearing their plaints." So basically, Gilgamesh is rampaging around. He's beating up the young men who are supposed to be his warriors. He is raping the young women who are supposed to be his citizens, I guess. Not citizens in the ancient world, but you know what I mean. They are supposed to be under his protection as king. He's doing a shitty job as king, basically. He is destroying the people that he is supposed to be protecting. So this is Gilgamesh's immature phase. So the gods hear the complaints of the people, and they create the wild man Enkidu to be the equal of Gilgamesh. And there's a really bizarre bit here where basically a prostitute goes out to Enkidu, who lives in the wilderness by himself with the animals, and they have sex for 7 days and 7 nights, after which point he smells like a human being, so the animals are like, "Nah bro, go to the city." So Enkidu goes to the city and he fights Gilgamesh for no particularly good reason. They just sort of, "Hey, you're a large tough dude, I'm a large tough dude." Fighting arbitrarily seems like the natural response. And so after they fight, pretty much to a draw, they take the next logical course of action, which is to become BFFs. So Gilgamesh and Enkidu become companions, and they decide to go on a great quest. They go to a great cedar forest to basically steal some cedar trees, because in the ancient Near East, cedar trees were incredibly valuable. They were what you build the best temples out of, and so on and so on. But they were also, I think you had to go closer to what's now Lebanon than in sort of Iraq, where Uruk and these ancient Mesopotamian cities were. So it was a pretty decent journey. So they go to the Cedar Forest and they fight the guardian of the forest named Humbaba, who is a pretty fearsome dude. But they manage, between the two of them, to defeat him, bring the cedars back, at which point the goddess Ishtar sees Gilgamesh and says, "Hey, you're pretty sexy. I would like to have you as my consort." And Gilgamesh is like, "No, I don't think I want to do that." Which is not the answer Ishtar is looking for. And so she sends down the Bull of Heaven, which is this sort of great rampaging beast, and Enkidu and Gilgamesh fight the Bull of Heaven, they defeat it, and then they make a mistake. They rip off the leg of the Bull of Heaven and they throw it at Ishtar. Now, as general life advice, war goddesses do not really appreciate having the severed legs of mystical beasts thrown at them after their sexual advances have been rejected. So keep that under your hats for future reference. So as a penalty for these great insults, Ishtar sends down a sickness, Enkidu gets sick, and he dies. And Gilgamesh is distraught, and he wanders the plains for a while. Basically, Gilgamesh is distraught not only because his friend is dead, but also because he realizes for the first time that he is also going to die. And so this is something that he really is not keen on. Because he's grown some. He's learned the value of friendship through his relationship with Enkidu, but he's still in that sort of upward trajectory toward becoming a decent king and a decent member of a community. So he learns about this guy named Utanapishtim. And Utanapishtim is a sort of Noah figure, if you want to think of this as a sort of analog to the Jewish or Christian Bible. Utanapishtim is super old, and basically immortal, and he's the only survivor of an ancient flood that destroyed all the other stuff. He survived on a boat. And so Gilgamesh decides that he is going to go to Utanapishtim and figure out the secret of being immortal. So it's quite a challenge to get there. Again, it's a quest narrative, and so Gilgamesh has to cross this great ocean and stuff like this. And then basically Utanapishtim sets him some challenges. He more or less overcomes the challenges. Like, one of the challenges is he has to stay awake for 7 days, and he doesn't actually. He does fall asleep. But Utanapishtim kind of gives him a pass and says, all right, there's this herb. If you go get it and you eat it, you will be immortal. Gilgamesh goes and gets the herb, and then while he's having a break on his sort of boat trip back to the regular world, a snake eats it, basically. So Gilgamesh, on a coffee break, snake slinks up, he's like, eternity herb, I'm gonna eat that. And he pieces out. Gilgamesh now does not have the herb, so he's pretty distraught because his quest was now sort of a failure. But when he and the boatman being named Orshanabi, get back toward the city of Uruk, Sorry, my friend just came by to drop off some microgreens that he's growing, so my transitions lenses are gonna slowly transition back to being normal. But so they get back to the city of Uruk, and Gilgamesh says this to Urshanabi. We've got here a bit of preface and then Gilgamesh's comment. The poet says, "At 20 double leagues they took a bite to eat, at 30 double leagues they made their camp. When they arrived in ramparted Uruk, Gilgamesh said to him, to Urshanabi the boatman, 'Go up, Urshanabi, pace out the walls of Uruk, study the foundation terrace and examine the brickwork. Is not its masonry of kiln-fired brick? And did not the 7 masters lay its foundation? 1 square mile of city, 1 square mile of gardens, 1 square mile of clay pits, and a half square mile of Ishtar's dwelling. 3.5 square miles is the measure of Uruk.'" And so this is a significant ending, in part because it actually takes us back to the description of the city at the beginning of the poem, but because this is Gilgamesh really for the first time externalizing. So at the beginning of the poem, we remember that he was a terrible king who was terrorizing the people, beating up the young men, raping the young women, etc., etc. He was a bad ruler because he was thinking of his own enjoyment rather than of the good of the city. Now, after he's lost the opportunity for personal immortality, he comes back and he realizes that what's important is actually the city itself. The eternal, the thing that is immortal is not the individual, but it's the collective, the community. And so the poem ends with this integration into a community, which we have to assume, because this is the culmination of a coming-of-age narrative, that Gilgamesh is now going to be a much better king.